Tyler raised his glass high enough for everyone to see the condensation slide down its stem. "To my sister," he said, his grin wide and sharp. "She rents homes for a living and still calls herself a property manager. You should try building something of your own someday." "Maddie," the table laughed. A polished echo of money and condescension. I didn't look at him. I looked at Emma across the table, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. Tyler leaned back and added, "You know, sweetheart, your mom used to talk about legacy, but legacies aren't built on leases." His words were deliberate, designed to bruise in public. I smiled instead. Because humiliation only works if the audience believes it. He kept going, swirling his drink. "Don't take it personally. Maddie, some people were meant to own, others to maintain." The guests nodded like well-trained seals, their laughter clinking against the glassware. I set down my napkin, folded it once, and said quietly, "You should check who maintains your mortgage before speaking about ownership." He froze just long enough for the sound of silverware to stop. Emma blinked at me, her eyes full of questions I wasn't ready to answer. "Mom," she whispered, "why didn't you say something sooner?" I took a sip of water. Steady and deliberate. "Because timing is everything," I told her. Tyler smirked, unaware that the words weren't for him. I leaned closer to Emma, my voice low enough that only she could hear. "Let him talk," I said. "By midnight, his mortgage will be mine." The air around us shifted just slightly, just enough for me to know the night had already begun to turn. Tyler's company, Row Developments, had its name etched on half the new construction signs across Seattle. People called him a visionary, but I knew the truth behind the gloss. The last 3/4 of his financials read like a drowning man's journal debt restructuring. Deferred payments. Disparate optimism. When I mentioned it once, he laughed and said, "Numbers are stories. Maddie, I just tell better ones." He built his fortune on borrowed confidence and my father's name, while I built my living one, closing at a time. House by house. I managed rentals for clients who trusted me because I never lied about value. "You're still doing small deals?" Tyler had asked during our last family dinner. "You could join my team." "Stop playing realtor," I told him. "I'd rather own something small that's mine than polish something broken that isn't." He smirked, mistaking conviction for bitterness. When my phone buzzed that night with a message from Caroline Vega, his CFO, I already knew what it meant. "He's cooking the numbers again," she wrote. I stared at the text for a full minute before replying. "Document everything." Caroline didn't respond. She didn't have to. The silence between us was agreement. The kind born from watching a man set fire to his own foundation. I knew exactly how far the flames would reach. Tyler's empire looked solid from the outside because he was good at hosting tours. Investors saw the glass offices, the staged lobbies, the leased Bentleys parked out front. What they didn't see were the unpaid contractors, the inflated invoices, the quiet panic of a man who owed more than he owned. "You think I don't know business?" he once said over brunch, waving his phone like proof. "My portfolio's worth millions." I looked at the cracked screen and said, "Then you should check whose name is on the deeds." I have no. For 3 years, Rain Harbor Holdings had been buying the very loans that kept him afloat. Every closing he celebrated. Every refinance he bragged about. I had signed off on in silence. He never asked where the capital came from. He only cared that it arrived on time. Power blinded him so thoroughly that he never saw the wire transfers coming from me. The same woman he called a renter was the reason his empire still stood. Tyler's launch event for the Beacon Project was everything he loved: spotlights, champagne, and cameras that reflected his own grin back at him. He stood at the podium, voice smooth as marble, promising investors a skyline reborn. Row Developments isn't just building homes, he declared. We're building the future. The crowd applauded like believers at a sermon, unaware that the land under his dream was already spoken for. When I arrived, his assistant hesitated before handing me a name tag. You're not on the list, she said quietly. I smiled and replied, That's fine. I never liked being predictable. Tyler spotted me from the stage and his expression flickered between annoyance and performance. My sister's here, he said into the mic. The words wrapped in mock warmth. The family support means everything, especially from someone who knows how to sell other people's property. The room laughed on cue, and I felt the sting I'd been expecting. I walked closer, the sound of my heels blending with his voice. You know, Tyler, I said when the crowd quieted. You should learn to read your own contracts. He smirked, arms open like a showman. Is that a threat or a sales pitch? I tilted my head just slightly. Neither, I said. It's advice. It helps to know who owns the land beneath your empire. A hush fell sharp enough to hear the cameras clicking. Tyler's smile faltered, the kind of pause that reveals the first crack in glass. He recovered fast, clapping once as if to dismiss me. Ladies and gentlemen, he laughed. Ignore her. Every family has one, the sibling who reads too many blogs and thinks they're an expert. I turned to the reporters near the stage and said calmly, Ask your questions about the Beacon title deed. The name on it isn't his. For a second, the silence became something alive, stretching between us like a wire about to spark. I left before the first flash went off, his voice still chasing me through the noise. You'll regret embarrassing me. Maddie. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. The truth had already stepped into the light without my permission. Caroline met me in the corner booth of a coffee shop that had been half forgotten by the city's noise. She slid a folder across the table, her voice low. He's been shifting accounts again. The Beacon numbers don't match the subsidiary ledgers. I opened the folder, the paper warm from her hands. Clause B still stands. I said, Any manipulation of financial statements gives temporary control to the majority shareholder. She nodded, eyes steady. You're the only one who qualifies. I closed the file. Then we act before he realizes how exposed he is. I will. She leaned back, scanning my face. He'll fight back. He always does. I stirred my coffee once, the spoon clicking against porcelain. That's the point. I told her. I need him to. Quiet men are easy to underestimate, but loud men always give you what you need. Caroline's lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. You really think he'll come quietly? I looked out the window where the rain blurred the skyline he thought he owned. He'll come loudly, I said, and that's how I'll close the door. 1. Later, I met with Liam Carter in his office lined with case files and tired ambition. You've got enough evidence, he said, tapping the binder between us. The transfers alone can trigger the clause. I asked. And it holds up if we move tonight, he nodded. Legally airtight. But you're walking into a war zone. Maddie, I almost laughed. It's not a war if one side doesn't know it started. He raised an eyebrow, the kind of look that carried both respect and warning. You could just sell your stake. Walk away clean. I shook my head. He'd think that meant he won. Dissed. When I stepped outside, the city felt sharper, the kind of cold that keeps you awake. My phone buzzed Caroline again. He called an emergency press meeting tomorrow. Her message read. He's spinning the Beacon story as a victory. I typed back. Good. Let him have his last headline. The plan wasn't about revenge anymore. It was arithmetic. Numbers don't lie when the signatures are real. Every document I'd gathered. Every late-night call. Every account ledger was a step toward equilibrium. He'd built noise, I'd built proof. Caroline had said he'd fight back. I hoped she was right. A fight was the only way to make him hear the silence waiting for him. The boardroom smelled of expensive panic. The kind that hides under polished mahogany and glass. Tyler walked in late, still talking to someone on his phone. "Make sure the press release hits first thing tomorrow," he said, dropping his briefcase onto the table. When he saw me, his grin faltered. "What is this? Maddie? A family intervention? Because I don't do those anymore." I looked up from the folder in front of me. "It's not an intervention, Tyler. It's a meeting." He scoffed, gesturing at Caroline and Liam. "And what? They're your audience? You're really wasting everyone's time for another moral lecture?" I slid the first document toward him. "You'll want to read this before you talk about time. It's a record of your transfers from company accounts to personal holdings." He didn't even look down. "I'm the CEO. Every transaction I make is legitimate business." Liam's voice stayed flat. "Not under Clause 14B. Fraudulent filings give controlling interest to the majority shareholder until proven otherwise." Tyler laughed, loud and forced. "And who exactly do you think that is?" I pushed the second folder across the table, the one bearing the signature he'd never noticed. "Rain Harbor Holdings," I said. 62% ownership. Purchased over 36 months. Every check cleared under your approval." He grabbed the folder, flipping through it, his fingers trembling once before tightening. "No, that's impossible. Rain Harbor is a shell firm in Portland." I held his gaze. "It's a firm I own." The silence that followed was almost kind. Then he slammed the folder shut. "You tricked me. You used me." I shook my head. "You used yourself. I just kept the receipts." "Dude." Caroline turned on the monitor. Spreadsheets blooming across the screen. The leases. The personal travel. The duplicate invoices, they all lead back to your expense authorizations. Tyler jabbed a finger toward her. "You were supposed to be loyal." Caroline didn't flinch. "I am. To the company. Not your ego." He turned to me, eyes narrowing. "You planned this from the start." "No," I said quietly. "I planned to save you once. You planned this." He started pacing, the rhythm of a man measuring the edges of his own downfall. "You can't just walk in here and take everything I built." I met his anger with calm. "You didn't build it, Tyler. You decorated it. And..." He stopped moving, the exhaustion starting to seep through the fury. "So what happens now? You destroy me? Make me the villain?" I leaned back, letting the weight of his question hang between us. "You already did that work. I'm just filing the paperwork." Liam slid a final document toward him. "Effective immediately. Per corporate statute. You're suspended pending audit." Tyler's laugh cracked. "You can't suspend me. I am Row Developments." I stood. "You were. Now you're an employee of it." "Too." He stared at me, disbelief curdling into something raw. "Maddie, we're family." I nodded once. "Exactly. That's why you still have a salary instead of a court date." He looked at Caroline. Then Liam. Then back to me. The realization settling like dust. "What am I supposed to do now?" he whispered. "You can start by learning what ownership really means." His lips parted as if to argue, but nothing came out. The sound in the room shrank until it was just the soft hum of the air vents and the quiet shuffle of papers finding their places. I gathered the folders, stacking them neatly in front of me. "The company's yours to rebuild," I said. "The noise isn't..." He didn't answer. He just sat there, watching the walls that once reflected his power now reflect his silence instead. When I reached the door, he finally spoke. "You think you've won?" I turned enough for him to see my face. "Winning implies a competition." I just corrected the math. And as I walked out, I knew the sound of the door closing behind me would echo longer than any applause he'd ever chased. The audit began within 24 hours, and the headlines followed by the end of the week. Tyler's name filled them, heavy with words like mismanagement and restructuring. Caroline took interim control, her signature replacing his on every document that mattered. When she called to confirm the transfer, she said quietly, "It's done. The company's stable again." I told her, "Keep it that way. Stability is rarer than success." Dozdy. Emma asked me one evening, "Is Uncle Tyler going to jail?" I shook my head. "No. Just somewhere smaller. Consequences don't always need bars." She frowned. "So you forgave him?" I thought for a moment. "Not exactly. Forgiveness is for people who stop pretending. He's still pretending." She nodded slowly. The kind of understanding that doesn't come from age but from observation. That was how I knew she'd been paying attention all along. Tyler sent one message, no excuses. No defense. Just a single line. "You win." I read it twice, then deleted it. Winning had never been the goal. Ending the noise was. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. The way calm fills a room after a storm has spent itself. Caroline later told me the staff had started calling the office atmosphere normal. That word felt better than victory ever could. I didn't sell the company. I turned part of it into a fund for affordable housing. Small projects that gave people something real to stand on. Emma looked at the first signed deal and asked, "Why not start over with something new?" I said. "Because this time, it ends with purpose." The truth was simple. I didn't destroy Tyler's empire. I redefined it. In the quiet that followed, I realized power didn't have to roar, it could rebuild in silence. The city looked different from my new office. Not a Gallagher. As if it had finally taken a breath. Emma stood beside me, tracing the skyline with her eyes. "So, it's really over?" she asked. I said, "It's never over. Just quieter." The reflection in the glass showed two women, one who had fought for truth, and one learning how to carry it. I sent the final email. The subject line, simple, ownership transfer complete. Watching it vanish from my outbox, I thought about how silence isn't emptiness, it's earned space. Power doesn't announce itself, it endures. Steady and unshaken. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. If it found you at the right moment, let it remind you that silence is not surrender, it's strategy. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it rebuilds quietly. I hope you return for the next story that finds its own truth.